I'm here this morning with my colleagues on Columbus City Council to lay out a path forward. At this press conference, we will tell you what we plan to do. We will tell you when we plan to do it. And I ask the public to hold us accountable for what we say today. My colleagues and I do not claim to have every answers. And we've all got to get comfortable in that space of uncertainty, because what we are actually after is radical change. And radical change isn't about taking the road less traveled. If there was a perfect roadmap to a safe and just community, we wouldn't have the mass demonstrations from coast to coast. Today's announcements consist of two parts: what we will do in the short term and what we plan to do in the long term. In the next month, Council will put forward a package of legislation regarding police and public safety. This multi-point strategy is made up of four critical elements. First, no-knock and quick knock raids. It was a no-knock raid that led to the murder of Breonna Taylor. Many experts consider the no-knock raids to be widely dangerous and traumatizing for families subjected to such practices, as well as unsafe for police. Second, hate group background checks for police. There is no reason that a recruit or a current officer should have any affiliation with a hate group or cultural supremacy organization. If they do, then we need to rectify their affiliation with the Columbus Division of Police. Third, demilitarization. This starts with reviewing the weapons our police have access to and destroying weapons that don't belong in our city. Fourth, independent investigations. Currently, the Internal Affairs Bureau of the CPD investigates the Columbus Division of Police. The community does not have faith in this system of self-accountability. That's why we need a separate system, and we look forward to advancing that conversation. We will have numerous public hearings on these topics, and we want to hear from the community. We want to listen, and we are prepared to act on these measures of police reform. Now, some will say that this is way too much and we're moving too fast, and others will say that this isn't enough and we're moving too slow. But because change in our police department is so important, not just to me, but to our council and to our community, we must be clear, we must be transparent and honest in our policy making. With that said, this initial package can and will get done by the end of July. We also know that this legislative package isn't near enough. And that's why after our legislative break and heading into our budgetary process, we will provide a venue for folks to reimagine public safety. The current system is not working, and we need to develop something better together. During this community engagement process, we will have the opportunity to talk about what we want to see and how we see our city moving forward. I'm committed to imagining a different kind of public safety. We're committed to reimagining a different kind of public safety. I imagine a city where if our elderly neighbors have dementia and gets into an argument with their family member, that someone who overhears them could call a mental health specialist to show up and intervene. I imagine a city where if you get shot and end up in our hospitals, that a social worker will help make sure you've got what you need to thrive rather than retaliate. I imagine a city where folks don't come up to me at my nephew's kindergarten graduation to tell me that they're scared, where my neighbors don't have to hold back tears and say, if the police did what we saw 3 weekends ago and pepper spray you, Congresswoman Beatty and Commissioner Boyce, then what the hell would they do to me? In order to transform public safety, we need our collective imagination. Elected leadership does not have all the answers, but we're committed to working with the community to reimagine what public safety is in our city. This effort after the August recess is additive to the efforts of the Community Safety Advisory Commission, who we appreciate and applaud, and look forward to going back to time and time again to make sure that we're on the right path. We need to implement those recommendations. And we also need to go further to expand our understanding of what safety means. Council is one branch of government. We will continue to collaborate with the other branches, but we have a role that is uniquely our own. We are the legislative branch. We are the deliberative branch. We don't hire, we don't fire, but we do write laws and we do pass budgets. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to my friend, my colleague, and leader on this council, President Pro Tem Elizabeth Brown.
Thank you so much, President Hardin. It is clear that we can't solve the problems that exist in policing until we confront the fact that we have overinvested in an infrastructure based on criminalization while underinvesting in other kinds of investments that our whole community, and especially our African American community, needs so badly. There are things in Columbus that are working. Council President laid out a vision for what we need to see as a city and what we need to work towards. Some of those things are happening now, and how do we start to augment those strengths that we already have while also understanding the skewed system that exists? The skewed system that caused the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Henry Green, and too many others was created by policymakers over time. And it can be corrected by policymakers. That's why we're here. We will need broad engagement by residents across our city to help us answer the fundamentally important question we currently are asking, which is, what keeps all residents safe? We know the current and long-standing system isn't doing that, especially for African Americans and people of color right here in our city. What we're discussing today is the work of our generation. This generation of youth is speaking out for a better future. This generation of parents is organizing for the lives and health and safety of our children. This generation of grandparents is coming together to say enough. We owe to every family in our city the same opportunity and equality we want for our own families. Let's leave Columbus better than we found it. One step I believe we can implement quickly is addressing the tools our police department uses. We cannot give military-style equipment to our police division and expect officers employed by it to keep the peace. The presence of police should never look and feel to residents as if we are at war. So that is why I'm announcing a Finance Committee hearing next Tuesday, June 30th at 4:00 p.m. to discuss revisions to the city's purchasing code. We will be looking at what equipment our police force is authorized to purchase and use in our city. We will hear from the division, and most importantly, we will hear from residents about what they believe keeps all of us safe. And then, as the council president outlined, looking ahead, council will engage with members of the community as we prepare the 2020 operating budget. We want to look beyond the current model for policing and answer that fundamental question of how we keep all residents in our community safe. Again, we know we have things in our community that is working. We have things like the violence interventionists employed through Columbus Urban League and Community for New Directions. We have our APPS program. We have the CARE Coalition. We have so much good work being led by communities. We have organizers like the People's Justice Project in communities working with people about how to heal from trauma and avoid violence. Let's strengthen what we know is working. Typically, the mayor submits his proposed 2021 budget to City Council in November, and after review, Council aims to pass the budget in early February. This year, we plan to start hearings earlier in the fall as a critical part of advancing the specific recommendations of the Safety Advisory Commission, and what we hear from residents. The answers and path forward lie in the voices of those who are fighting to be heard right now, doing that generational work. We all must listen. Again, when looking at answering that fundamental question, are we keeping every resident safe? We know that the current system isn't. Right now, we must be pro-progress, pro-change, pro-civil rights. If we are those things, we will be on the right side of history. If we're for the status quo, we will be on the wrong side of history. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Councilmember Rob Dorans, who will detail additional reforms.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Brown, Council President Harden, Councilmember Favor, my colleagues joining us virtually. Over the past month, I've heard from literally thousands of people in this community, easily more than any other issue in my time on City Council. I've heard their lack of confidence and trust that they have in our current public safety system. That lack of trust and confidence must be restored in order for us to tackle the long-term systemic changes that we're here to focus on today. This moment demands that of all of us, City Council, the Mayor's office, every branch of government, and the people in the streets. We know that we cannot rebuild this trust overnight. But as a council member, as a member of this community, I know the time is now to take impactful steps towards rebuilding that trust. A fundamental step is addressing how we investigate uses of force by the Division of Police. President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing calls for, quote, strong systems and policies that encourage a use of an independent prosecutor for reviewing police uses of force and for prosecution in cases of inappropriate deadly force and in custody deaths will demonstrate that the transparency to the public can lead towards a mutual trust between the community and law enforcement. That's what we're looking to do here in Columbus. Many have asked the question, how can we trust the police to investigate themselves? This question itself demonstrates a system that breeds a lack of trust. That is why I'm announcing that City Council will take action to codify Mayor Ginther's executive order to have the use of force incidents be investigated by an independent agency for the first time in our city's history. Allow me to be crystal clear. While shifting these investigations to the Ohio Attorney General's Office Bureau of Criminal Investigation is important, but is not a perfect solution, nor is it a long-term one. The Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission spent a considerable amount of time reviewing different models of local independent agencies to conduct these types of investigations. That is why I'm planning to hold a public hearing with the Safety Advisory Commission in July to have a public discussion about how we get this right for Columbus. We need true independence, independence that the community has confidence in, not simply just another law enforcement agency that looks and sounds and feels just like another agency that so many have lost faith in, but something that we can trust to conduct fair and independent investigations for our community members, but also for our officers. We don't need another study, we don't need another commission or panel to tell us how to reshape the way we investigate the use of force of officers. We've heard loud and clear from our residents. Now is the time for legislative action to create an independent investigation to restore the trust and confidence that I know is felt by so many in this community. With that, I'd like to introduce Councilmember Favor to discuss more reforms that Council is considering. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, got ahead of myself. I'd like to introduce Councilmember Remy, who's joining us virtually.
Give myself a all right. Thank you so much, Councilman Dorans. you guys turn down the podium, maybe. All right. Thank you so much, Councilman. Hold on. Is this my? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Councilmember.
Sorry. As I continue to grapple with the senseless, preventable murder of Miss Breonna Taylor in Louisville by the Louisville, Kentucky police officers shortly after midnight, March 13th, I find myself completely apprehensive about the use of no-knock and quick-knock warrants in the city of Columbus. 2 weeks ago today, Thursday, June 11th, Louisville Committee stepped in the right direction when all 26 members of the Louisville City Council voted in favor of Breonna's law, which bans any search warrant that does not require police to announce themselves and their purpose for being at the premise. I think it would be a disservice to not acknowledge the foreseeable risks associated with the use of no-knock and quick-knock policies in our community. Just last year, about a year ago, we purchased a new home around the corner from our previous home. Within a few months of us being there, a multi-jurisdictional SWAT team showed up at my front steps at 7:15 in the morning while my kids were watching out the window. This was not the first time that I'd had law enforcement at our house. A simple search of the auditor's site would have showed that the property had changed hands at that time. My kids wouldn't have witnessed as I walked out and our dog ran out onto the front porch as an officer went to draw his gun, the things that could have happened that day. In these situations, you don't know what to do or how to respond. All you can think about is protecting your family. I know the nightmare that I continue to have about what could have happened that day had a no-knock or quick-knock, had I not walked outside to meet those officers. And more importantly, what we witnessed happen with Breonna Taylor, because of the potential risk to our community, I am committed to reviewing our current raid policies to ensure that they align with best practices and the greater good of the residents we serve. I am also committed to having an open and transparent dialogue and conversation with our community about those tactics as this discussion develops. We will be hosting a public hearing in early July to discuss no-knock and quick-knock warrants. The community's input is important. With that, I would like to now turn this over to my colleague, Councilmember Shayla Favor.
Thank you, Councilmember Remy. I stand here today not only as a Columbus resident and a member of this legislative body, but as a Black woman who has been deeply impacted by the recent events that have taken place throughout our country and right here in our city. The images and stories of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and numerous others who were all victims of police brutality and racism have been disturbing, to say the least. I have 3 nephews and 1 niece, and there is never a moment that I do not think that the next hashtag that comes across my feed could not be a member of my own family. You see, this is not political for me. This is personal. I've marched and attended protests because the fear of the what if is a reality for many people of color in this country. I have had the talk of being careful with my family because I understand on a personal level that racism and implicit bias are not just buzzwords, that these things do exist, and they exist right here in Columbus. And I understand that the topic of race is uncomfortable, but Black Americans have been uncomfortable for far too long and have had to adjust in order to survive. The irony that our residents are being treated so poorly by police for protesting the very flawed system of policing that exists here in Columbus and throughout our country should not be lost on anyone. I am beyond disappointed and fed up with this unacceptable behavior. We will not tolerate hate, and we will not tolerate any individual or group attempting to hijack the movement that is in front of us right now. A majority of protesters have been peaceful, and they deserve to continue exercising their First Amendment rights without distractions and without unwarranted violence. Multiple things can exist and be true at the same time. I can acknowledge that there are great public servants that serve as officers, prosecutors, and judges in our community, while also acknowledging the fact that our criminal justice system is and has always been flawed. The United States has the world's highest incarceration rate, with 2.3 million Americans in prison today. But even worse, 70% of those who are incarcerated are non-white. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, Latino men have a 1 in 6 chance of being in prison at some point in their life, and for African American men, it is more than 1 in 3 chance. For white men, it sits around 1 in 23. And you can see how we get to these disproportionate numbers over time with the creation of policies like the war on drugs and mandatory sentencing to support measures that are tough on crime. But we've also seen over the past several weeks is the criminalization of Black people living their everyday lives, whether it's going out for a jog, driving with a friend, sleeping in your home at night, and even bird watching. We cannot afford to pretend, ignore, or invalidate the experiences of Black and brown people within our country, and especially within our criminal justice system. Today, I stand here with my colleagues on council to say that the time is now to act on reimagining what public safety looks like in Columbus. This will include moving forward legislation in support of code changes that will require hate group background checks for police and 911 call center operators. There is no place for racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, or any other type of discrimination within law enforcement. Recruits and officers that have a proven history of affiliation with a hate group should be rooted out before they are placed on our streets, and they should be terminated if present-day affiliation is discovered. This concept was submitted by a resident and is in line with a recommendation number 37 from the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission, which called for a signed morality clause for all officers that would also require officers to agree to equal protection for all citizens, to denounce any cultural supremacist groups, and to report any officer's malfeasance to internal affairs. We will host hearings with the Department of Human Resources and Civil Service to explore these concepts. I look forward to working with my colleagues in the coming weeks to advance these discussions. Reimagining public safety looks at examining the city's budget and determining where fewer dollars can be allocated towards policing and where more dollars can be put towards safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. The Justice Policy Institute found that an increase in spending on housing is associated with a decrease in violent crime at the national level and a decrease in incarcerations at the state level. Violent crime rates decreased when funding was shifted to housing forum corrections. We cannot forget that we have a housing problem in Columbus. Whether we are looking at Franklin County's unacceptable high eviction rate that disproportionately affects women of color, the lack of affordable units within our housing stock, or the increasing burdensome of homelessness on our shelter system, we have a major problem. Let us put more effort and intention towards housing equity and justice. I am reaffirming my commitment to fight for housing in this community, and I will continue to examine our budget and advocate for the appropriate resources through this lens. Finally, as chair of Council's Criminal Justice Committee, I need our residents to know that I am committed to the long fight that is in front of each and every one of us. The ideas we are putting in front of you today are not the end. We still have so much work to do to solve these problems that have existed long before each and every one of us. And we have to remember the principles upon which this system was built. The truth is, they weren't originally designed to include all of us, but we are here now, and we can make the difficult but necessary changes to advance true equity in the city of Columbus. We have to find a way to facilitate productive conversations between our police officers, community members, and elected officials. It will require each of us to achieve the ideal community that we all want to live in, but we all have to participate openly and honestly. That means we have to hold everyone accountable for their actions. It is not just our police officers or our mayor. It is each of us here at City Council. It is our city attorney. It's our judges and the courts. It's our teachers, our educators, and our business leaders, and our corporate community. We all have a responsibility to do the work at every level, and I take that responsibility seriously. I want to thank all of the residents who have taken the time to make their voices heard over the past several weeks. We received thousands of emails and phone calls from residents about your disappointment and your fears, but also about your hopes and your expectations for the future. We cannot do any of this work without your support and your guidance. I look forward to continuing to listen, but also to work together to build a better Columbus for every citizen that calls this city home. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my Councilmember Priscilla Tyson. Councilmember Tyson.
Thank you, Councilmember Favor. And I also want to thank all my colleagues who have certainly shared the work that we will be embarking upon over the next few weeks. As a member of this body and a lifelong resident of Columbus, I'm committed to ensuring the safety of all of our residents. Unfortunately, in our community, Black and Brown people do not feel safe or protected, and this has to change. Earlier this month, with the support of this council, I passed a resolution declaring racism as a public health issue. While it is my firm belief that racism and bigotry needs to be eradicated for all communities and groups, I have focused on African Americans because of our experience in this country, which has a profound impact on our quality of life. African Americans are disproportionately impacted by challenges and inequities, including the social determinants of health, which consist of housing, crime, incarceration, education, employment, poverty, food insecurity, healthcare, and public safety. Racism has allowed preferential opportunities for some while subjecting people of color to hardship and disadvantages in every area of life. In 2016, Black Americans comprised 27% of all individuals arrested in the United States, which is double the Black population. Black youth accounted for 15% of all US children, yet made up 35% of juvenile arrests that year. African Americans are more likely than white Americans to be arrested. Once arrested, they are more likely to be convicted. and once convicted, they are more likely to experience lengthy prison sentences. African American adults are 5.9 times more likely to be incarcerated than whites, and Hispanics are 3.1 more likely to be incarcerated. Gathering data for the Commission on Black Girls, we have found that in Columbus, Black girls are 1.5 times more likely to be victims of crime, but also 2 times more likely to be suspects. What might appear at first to be a linkage between race and crime is in a large part of a function of concentrated urban poverty, which is far more common for African Americans than for any other racial groups. As we consider the data and we continue our efforts to affirm that Black Lives Matter, we not only have to ensure that Black people are treated fairly and are protected by law enforcement, equity in all the areas that impact the quality of Black people has to be addressed. As chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, I will continue to work to support funding for services and organizations that focus on enhancing the quality of life of our residents. As we fund organizations, I will be looking at racial equity and supporting organizations that are serving and employing people of color. Further, as we imagine public safety, our social service organizations are critically important. Social workers can offer support to law enforcement, as is exemplified with NetCare and the REACT service delivery models, where law enforcement works in cooperation with mental health professionals and social workers. When residents are in need of other more appropriate interventions that don't include incarceration, as a community, we need to have programs and systems in place that help people secure affordable and emergency housing, affordable healthy food, job training, and jobs that pay livable wages, as well as mental and physical health care services. Additionally, we have the Columbus Care Coalition that offers individuals, families, and neighborhoods an opportunity to heal after experiencing trauma. Healing and receiving services can prevent additional traumatic events from occurring in a community. In conclusion, the data I've mentioned demonstrates that there are racial disparities in the criminal justice system that we must address. However, feeling safe and protected goes beyond law enforcement. I want to stress to feel safe in our community also means, again, Black people must have access to quality housing, food, jobs, education, transportation, and healthcare. To feel safe, there must be efforts to address racial disparities and poverty that Black people are experiencing. You have my commitment to work with this community, to work with our social service agencies, to identify more opportunities to be able to help to make sure that we have services in our community to help our residents to move forward and to move out of poverty, which is underlying many of the issues that we're talking about today. So thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to our resident subject matter expert on public safety, Council Member Mitch Brown.
Thank you, Councilmember Tyson. I appreciate the comments. And first, I would like to thank all my colleagues for their comments and engagement in ensuring the Columbus Division of Police meets the expectations of the community they serve. As we move forward with the initiatives Council has announced today, I think it is important to state that our community needs law enforcement. I support Chief Tom Quinlan because he is in the process of implementing the necessary changes recommended by the Community Safety Advisory Committee and the Matrix Report. And I also support the Columbus Division of Police. There are individuals, both inside and outside our community, that commit violent acts against others and violate their rights. Those individuals must be subject to the law, and it's imperative that we have a well-trained, well-equipped law enforcement agency to maintain our community safety. However, law enforcement must also accept the responsibility to uphold the law equitably and justly. I believe the majority of the officers have a true calling to protect and serve the residents of the city with integrity, compassion, and respect. They care deeply about the city and its residents. Yet, there are officers within the Division of Police whose conduct and behavior has been called into question concerning interactions with residents in our city. It is vital that we institute policies that prohibit these officers from unjustly harming citizens. Officer misconduct must be independently reviewed and investigated with clarity and objectivity, especially in cases where there's use of force. When residents call for service or peacefully protest, they must receive a response that meets their expectations with the highest standards of performance. Officers make mistakes like all of us, but when those mistakes violate the rules and policies of the division, they must be held appropriately accountable. It is not only the trust of the community that is at stake, but the core principle of policing to serve and protect all members of society, regardless of race, age, or sexual orientation. I plan to use my experience to develop and support innovative programs that address mental health, addiction, and other socioeconomic crises. These solutions will reimagine the role of law enforcement in providing services to the community they serve. Currently, the Mobile Crisis Response Unit partners a police officer and a social worker to address a mental health crisis. We must continue to support and expand these programs to ensure residents receive a tailored response that results in the best possible outcome. Growing up during the 1960s, I experienced racism and I protested against it. I have personally experienced police misconduct, and I would do anything within my power to eradicate it. As a paramedic, as an administrator, and now as a legislator, I can tell you that change is constant. Sometimes it's hard, but it's always worth it. Working together, we can achieve success more quickly than we will separately. Council President, turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Thank you to all of my colleagues. As you've seen today, and as you will see over the next coming weeks, next coming months, and next coming years, council is not a monolith. We're going to have different opinions and different styles, but we are all committed to fundamentally changing public safety in our community. Folks have asked me, when are we going to go back to normal? And I hope that we don't. This is our moment to act. We have the opportunity to move legislation forward and spark a conversation that could change our city forever. I take that back, that will change our city forever. In the next month, we will put forward a short-term legislative package around demilitarization, around no-knock raids, around hate group affiliations and independent investigations. We will have hearings and we will vote. These are clear expectations so that the public can hold us accountable. And we are committed to longer-term efforts to reimagine public safety. We will announce how folks can engage. Many of my members have started to talk about that. We will get that information specifically out to residents so that they can be engaged. In conclusion, to my friends and family in the activist community, and to my friends and family that are members of the Division of Police, as a young black man helping to raise a young black man, we need radical change in our institutions of public safety and our understanding of public safety. As you've heard today, it's not just me, it's not just one council member, it's all of this council is standing united in the belief that we as a community can come together and create fundamental change. Now is our moment, now is our time. We can do this, Columbus. Look forward to engaging with each and every one of you as we go about this process. It won't be clean, and it won't be always neat and tight, but that's what hard work looks like. That's what legislative bodies do. They bring us together, we have the conversations, and then we make good policy. We look forward to taking questions one-on-one with any of the council members here, and I believe the council members that are with us on WebEx. We would love to take your questions one-on-one, though. Thank you.